My mother knew my wife was sleeping with my stepfather. She didn't just know. She let it happen. She watched me kiss a woman who shared a bed with her husband. She watched me raise a child whose eyes never matched mine. And she smiled, poured wine, passed the birthday cake, and said I was imagining things. For 10 years, I was a puppet in their theater of lies. And the reason she kept their secret? It wasn't love. It was loneliness. A selfish, gaping void inside her that swallowed my entire life. When she finally confessed, she didn't cry. She said, "You're strong, James. You can survive this." As if betrayal from your wife and your mother in the same breath was just another Monday. This isn't a story about infidelity. This is a story about being sacrificed for someone else's comfort. Marrying Sarah wasn't just an act of love. It was my first and only act of war against my mother. I was 40 now, but 13 years ago, at 27, I was a young man desperate to break free from the gilded cage my mother, Patricia, had built around me. She was a titan of industry, a widow who wore her grief like armor and managed both her empire and her only son with the same ruthless precision. Sarah was everything my mother hated. A dancer, vibrant, unapologetically sensual. "You think she's worthy of my son?" she hissed at our wedding reception. I looked at Sarah, beautiful, radiant, real, and said, "She's worthy of me." I thought I'd won. That was my first mistake. Then came Robert, not with thunder, but with a quiet knock, a polite smile, and a suit too sharp for a mid-level manager. He was 12 years younger than my mother, yet she welcomed him into her bed and our lives without hesitation. She claimed it was about companionship, a cure for loneliness. But looking back, it was about control. Robert had a way of making powerful women feel seen, desired, necessary. My mother, always afraid of being left behind, clung to that. She married him within months. The same woman who once screamed that my wife was a disgrace to the family now paraded her much younger husband like a trophy. At first, I was amused, then wary, but never suspicious enough. I was too busy trying to become something beyond Patricia's son. I worked around the clock, traveled endlessly, climbed every rung. While I flew across oceans to sign contracts, Robert was at my home fixing door hinges. While I rehearsed boardroom speeches, he was bringing my wife coffee, listening to her talk about lonely nights with a young child. He didn't push boundaries. He dissolved them, drop by drop, until he became part of the air she breathed. I once overheard Sarah on the phone late at night. She was crying, whispering, saying she felt like a single mom. I was about to knock, but then I heard his name, Robert, not mine. I froze. I didn't confront her. I told myself she needed a friend. She had once told me around our 3rd year that she had thought about leaving me. I begged her to stay. I believed love won that day, but maybe someone else convinced her too, and not for my sake. Our son was conceived shortly after. I had come home briefly, 2 weeks between long overseas trips. She seemed distant, her touch cold, her smile delayed, but she said she was just tired. When she told me she was pregnant, I was ecstatic. I didn't ask questions. The nurses said the baby had Robert's dimples. I laughed. So did Robert. But Sarah didn't. That same year, I saw something that stuck with me like a shard in the mind. I walked into my mother's kitchen and found Sarah and Robert laughing. Close. Too close. My mother watched them from the hallway. She smiled. Not a warning smile, a knowing one. That image would come back to haunt me years later, like a photograph left to rot in the dark. Robert was everywhere. My children loved him. Sarah leaned on him. And my mother? She had started calling him the glue of the family. He was the shadow in every photo, the echo in every room. But I told myself, better to have him there than not. At least someone was keeping things together while I worked. What I didn't know, what I couldn't have imagined, was that he wasn't just holding my family together. He was slowly replacing me in it. The first few years of my son's life were a masterclass in psychological warfare, and I was the only soldier on the battlefield who didn't know the war had started. Every doubt I had, every gut instinct that screamed at me, was expertly dismantled by the two people I should have been able to trust most, my mother and my wife, with Robert playing the role of the innocent bystander. Whenever I questioned why my son looked nothing like me, my mother would laugh it off. "Don't be silly, darling," she'd say. "He has your determination." It was always something intangible, something I couldn't argue against. They were experts at making my sanity feel like a conspiracy theory. Robert never tried to be my son's father. He simply was. He was there for the first steps I missed while on a conference call. He was the one who taught him to ride a bike because I was stuck at an airport. I once walked in on them in the backyard, Robert teaching my 10-year-old son how to throw a baseball. It was a perfect, sun-drenched, father-son moment. A moment that should have been mine. When they saw me, Robert didn't look guilty. He just smiled. A practiced, easy smile, and said, "Just keeping the little slugger busy until his real dad gets home." The casual cruelty of it. The way he underlined my absence and his presence in a single, folksy sentence stole the air from my lungs. My mother, watching from the kitchen window, just gave a slight nod, as if to approve of this perfect family portrait that I was intruding upon. The most tragic part? In the middle of this decade-long lie, we had another child. Our youngest daughter was born when our son was 2. For a while, things felt almost normal. Sarah was warmer, more present. We were a family again, bound by the shared joy and exhaustion of a new baby. Looking back, I realized that wasn't a reconciliation. It was an act of penance on her part, and I was too desperate for peace to see the difference. The lie hadn't vanished. It had just burrowed deeper, hiding behind a facade of domestic bliss. When our youngest daughter was born, in the hospital room, my mother held the baby, looked right at me and said, "See, James? Everything is perfect now. You have your beautiful family." It wasn't a statement of joy. It was a command to stop questioning, to accept her version of reality, to let the lie breathe and thrive. Over the years, the gaslighting became the background noise of my life. The lie had been told for so long that it had become their truth. My discomfort was the only thing that felt out of place. Robert would buy our son the most expensive gifts, always claiming it was from Grandma and me. He'd take him to sporting events, boys' trips, creating a world of memories that I had no part in. When I tried to object, to reclaim my role, Patricia would step in. "Robert adores him, James. Why would you want to deny your son that extra love? You should be grateful." Grateful. That was the word she used to put me in my cage. The end of my ignorance began on my son's 10th birthday. The party was a grand affair at my mother's house. A perfect performance of a happy, sprawling family. The cake was cut, presents were opened, and the wine flowed freely. Robert, flushed and boisterous, slung his arm around my son's shoulders to pose for a picture. "Look at this little champion," he slurred happily to a group of relatives. "He's the spitting image of me when I was his age. And my son?" He smiled wide, proud to be called his. I saw no confusion in his eyes, only certainty. The music didn't stop. People kept chatting. But for me, the world went completely silent. It wasn't just the words. It was the reactions. The flicker in Sarah's eyes. The way my mother quickly tried to change the subject. In that single, deafening moment of silence, 10 years of whispers, doubts, and dismissed fears crashed together and solidified into a single, unbearable, and undeniable truth. It felt like driving through a graveyard, except the corpse was my reality. The ride home from that birthday party wasn't silent. It was dead. The sound of the tires scraping against asphalt echoed like the dragging of chains. Sarah kept glancing at me, face pale, fingers clasped tight in her lap. She tried to speak once. Some limp excuse about Robert being drunk, how he didn't mean it. I didn't answer. I didn't even look at her. Her voice was just noise, like static from a dead frequency. When I finally spoke, as we pulled into the driveway, I didn't ask, "Did you cheat?" I asked, "How long have you considered me a fool?" She cried. And that was the most honest answer I'd gotten in a decade. That night, I didn't sleep in our bed. I sat in my home office until dawn, not working, just staring into the void beyond the glass. The city lights blurred into abstract streaks, like the smeared remains of memories I thought were real. But inside, my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Denial is a powerful anesthetic. But that night, the numbness wore off, and all I was left with was 10 years of agony, raw and awake. The cruelest part? The signs were never hidden. They had always been on display, like paintings in a museum of my own humiliation. My mother's knowing nod from the kitchen window, the nurse's offhand comment about Robert's dimples, Sarah's startled look when I came home early, Robert's hand on my son's shoulder, his shoulder. I hadn't been blind. I'd been tranquilized. Getting the DNA test wasn't a medical act. It was an execution, not of a person but of a lie, a legacy, a life. It was my second rebellion against my mother. The first was marrying Sarah. This one was colder, deadlier. I ordered the test online using a burner email. The kit came in a nondescript box, like shame delivered by FedEx. Collecting the sample was the hardest thing I've ever done. I waited until my son, the boy I'd raised, bathed, loved, was asleep. I crept into his room, the same room I had painted blue, filled with toys I had chosen. My hand trembled as I pulled a few strands of hair from his brush. Not from fear of being caught, but from something worse. My hands shook not from fear, but from grief. Because if the results came back positive, I'd grieve my sanity. If they came back negative, I'd grieve my son. I was a thief in my own house, stealing a piece of my own child to prove he wasn't mine. That's not betrayal, it's surgery without anesthesia. The next 7 days were a performance. I went to work. I made small talk. I read bedtime stories. I played catch in the backyard. Each throw a ghost echo of Robert's smug grin. I smiled at Sarah. I answered my mother's calls. I even laughed at one of Robert's jokes. But inside me, a scream was crawling through my ribs, looking for a way out. And the most terrifying thought wasn't that the test would come back negative. It was, what if I was wrong? What if the test said he was mine? For a fleeting second, the idea of being declared insane seemed kinder than knowing this was real. The email arrived on a Tuesday. One sentence changed everything. Subject line, "Your paternity test results are ready." My heart didn't race. It stopped. I locked the door, opened the file, and scrolled past the jargon, past the alleles, past the science, until I saw it. Probability of paternity, 0%. 0. Cold. Clinical. Final. It wasn't a tragedy anymore. It was math. And in that digital black and white, a decade of love, labor, and lies collapsed into nothing. It wasn't just my life that ended in that email. It was the last time I ever believed in family. For 48 hours after seeing that email, I felt nothing. Not sorrow, not rage, just silence. So complete, so unnatural. It howled louder than any scream. It wasn't shock. It was clarity. A clarity so cold, so focused, it felt surgical. I wasn't a victim anymore. I was the architect of an ending. Not with fire, not with vengeance, just with truth. And truth, when delivered at the right moment, can demolish even the mightiest foundations. I chose her office for the execution. The top floor of the skyscraper she owned, her ivory tower, her fortress of power. It was where she had made a kingdom ruled through fear and precision. When I stepped in, she was mid-call, issuing sharp orders. I didn't wait. I walked to her desk and ended the call with a single press of a button. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in 40 years, I saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in them. Fear. I didn't speak. I pulled a single sheet of paper from my coat, the paternity test. Still warm from the printer. I slid it across her desk. She didn't touch it at first. She just stared. Then slowly, she looked down, and I watched the cracks form. Not on the paper, on her face, on her armor, on the myth of the mother I thought I knew. The lines around her eyes deepened. Her mouth twitched, and the silence stretched. "The man you told me could replace my father," I said, voice calm, hollow, "has also done a fine job replacing me." She crumbled. Not in guilt, in terror. "Please, James," she whispered, crossing around the desk, gripping my hands with a strength born of desperation. "Don't say anything. We can fix this." I knew. I've known. But I couldn't be alone again. "He's all I have." Her voice cracked, raw and shameless. There was no remorse, only panic at losing control. That was the real betrayal. Not the affair, not the lies, but the choice. She chose her fear of loneliness over me, over her own son, over my children. In that instant, she stopped being a mother. She became a scared woman clutching the last thread of her illusion. I pulled my hands free. "Call them," I said. "Bring them here. Now." When Robert and Sarah walked in, their confusion quickly turned to dread. My mother's tear-streaked face, the silence in the room, the tension thick enough to shatter. It all told them everything they needed to know. They looked smaller now, shrunk. For the first time, I saw them clearly, not villains, not masterminds. Just two pathetic traitors standing in a palace of their own lies. Sarah sobbed my name. Robert stammered something about confusion, about feelings, about mistakes. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even move. I simply raised my hand. They stopped. "It's over," I said. Not to them, to the lie, to the decade that died the day that test arrived. "My lawyers will be in touch." I turned to Sarah. "We'll discuss custody of our daughters." Then to Robert. "You'll discuss child support for your son." I didn't wait for a response. I turned my back and walked out. And as I left that glass tower behind, I let silence fall like a verdict. May it echo longer than your lies ever did. There's no blueprint for rebuilding a soul. No guidebook for how to live after your world collapses. But I learned something: you don't rebuild by seeking justice. You rebuild by releasing what cannot be rebuilt. I got full custody of my daughters. That was the court's decision. But healing wasn't legal. It was spiritual. Sarah and Robert, they're trapped in each other's company now. A child binds them. A living reminder of what they destroyed to be together. I didn't have to punish them. Life did. I stopped caring. I stopped listening to updates from friends. I stopped rereading the old emails. One day, I even deleted every photo of my wedding. Not in rage, in peace. Because peace isn't forgetting. Peace is remembering without pain. My mother tried to reach out. Letters, voicemails, legal offers, threats disguised as love. I didn't respond. I didn't hate her. I just ceased to exist in her story. Karma, I came to understand, is not punishment. It is continuation. She created her own echo chamber of loneliness. And now it sings only to her. It was in a quiet bookstore that I picked up a book on Buddhism, almost by accident. One passage stayed with me. To cling is to suffer. To release is to be free. I whispered it to myself for weeks, like a broken prayer. It was true. Forgiveness required me to still see them. But release made them invisible. My daughters were growing, laughing, asking questions. One night, my eldest asked me, "Do you still love Grandma?" I paused. "I don't know," I said, "but I no longer hate her." "Why?" "Because I'm not in her story anymore." And that was it. That was freedom. I walk now. I breathe. I meditate. I laugh without waiting for something bad to follow. This is my karma. Not revenge, not justice, but stillness. I live in the quiet now. Not because I lost, but because I survived. If you're still here listening, maybe you've been hurt too. Maybe your house fell in silence like mine. Let me tell you something, you're not crazy. You're not weak. And your story isn't over. Not yet. If this journey meant something to you, subscribe. Not for me, but for yourself. For the reminder that healing is possible. That even when life burns it all down, you can rise. Quiet, slow, and whole again.